Peterson. Hurt.
Here.
Gilbert.
Present.
Swanson.
Here.
Parker. Poulos.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
And Mayor Tomes.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm used to have a verbiage going on and everything else. We're doing the Pledge of Allegiance and everything this also, huh?
No.
Just thought so.
This time.
Public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Nobody signed up. I don't see anybody jumping and running to the microphone. All right. Nothing there. We have a presentation. Pardon?
Virtual.
Can't do virtual.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, can't do virtual anymore for that. Presentations. We have a presentation of Public Works. You're up first.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Got some maps here to pass around. Take one. So as we can all see here, I'm here tonight to talk about some efficiencies we want to implement with our refuse collection. So I'm going to try and keep this nice and short and sweet. Augustana and Jason Upton and the have some much more exciting things to talk about tonight. So I'd like to remind everyone, questions, save all the hard ones for Bartels. So, so just dive right in here. So I'm not sure if everyone had the opportunity to kind of review what we're going to talk about here. So we have, kind of the history of refuse with a city like Rock Island is, Rock Island's an old city, and so, as techniques and services and all that evolved throughout the city's history, new services are added. And what ends up happening is you get kind of this aggregate of services, and they're not really efficient as they could be. So every now and again, you kind of got to reevaluate things and ask yourself, is there room for improvement in the way we're running our operations here? So I want to give some background information, kind of what about the refuse, our refuse operation, kind of the services we currently provide, the resources we have, some of the operational inefficiencies we're currently seeing, what we're going to recommend, who's going to be impacted by that, the benefits of that, and then we'll save some time here for some questions. All right, so the services the city of Rock Island offers. So Rock Island is, believe it or not, a unique city. Not a whole lot of cities actually still offers their own in-house refuse collection. We're real proud of that. We think we do a good job, but there's always room for improvement. So our primary service, as everybody knows, is automated refuse collection. That's the big trucks you see with the arms that go around, grab your cart, and tip it. Then we have manual refuse collection. We'll get into detail, into the weeds on some of these a little bit more here. Yard waste, recycling, of course, special pickups and city stops, and leaf collection. So these are kind of our primary functions. Now the refuse team, they do other functions. We enforce nuisance violations that come out of the inspections department. We perform right-of-way maintenance, litter pickup, and assist the street department when we have extra capacity. All right, so automated refuse collection. So that's our primary service. We have approximately 14,000 customers. Trash is collected 5 days a week. Each day is divided into 3 routes. So every day we put out 3 automated refuse trucks. They have 3 routes, and each driver picks up roughly 800 to 900 stops. This is an incentive route. What that means, when you're done with your route, you go home. Now, there's a caveat to that. No one is allowed to go home before 1 p.m. So if you get done before 3 o'clock, our duty day is 7 to 3. If you get done before 3 o'clock, the employees are allowed to go home and get paid for a full 8-hour day. Then we have manual refuse. This is just the old school, throw it in the back of the truck. These are all our stops that are in like unique areas. You might have a tight alley that we can't get a truck down, condo associations, some of those unique areas that we can't get into. We have 443 stops there. That's done on Wednesdays, and that's an incentive route as well. So when that driver's done, he is able to go home. Then we have yard waste. Again, this is just good old-fashioned manual collection. You drive around, you throw it in the back of the truck. Now, yard waste, we have 10,020 customers. The collection day for that is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then due to the volume and the increased participation of this program, we just added Thursday actually this year. So if you look at the map I gave you, you'll see the approximate number of yard waste stops per route. So that's each day of the week. So, you know, the drivers between 200 and 300 stops. So then we have recycling. There's a typo there. That's not actually a manual collection. That's an automated collection. That's contracted through Republic Services, and that's done Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Then we have our special pickup program, which is very, very popular. That's where residents get their one free bulk pickup a year. Those are done on Thursdays and Fridays. The drivers are assigned anywhere from 20 to 25 stops. That's manual collection. They're picking up that couch, throwing it in the back of the truck. That's done on Thursday and Friday. There's no incentive affiliated with that route. City stops, this is all our internal trash collection that we do with our city facilities and interdepartmental, like the dumpster here at City Hall. So the way this works, when the guys get done with their special pickups, we have half of our stops assigned to Thursday, half of our city stops assigned to Friday. They go around and they collect those when they're done with their special pickups. Leaf collection, everybody's favorite. That's seasonally, spring and fall. It's collected on the residents' trash collection day. There's no incentive affiliated with that. And this is, we'll get into this a little bit more, but this is one of the big inefficiencies that we have. It takes multiple trucks. It requires equipment rental usually, and we bring on seasonal labor. But we'll get into that a little bit more here. All right, so just kind of some background on the equipment we have. First off, I'd like to thank council for all the approval of new equipment you guys have done over the last few years. We really appreciate that, especially that new roll-off we just got. All these trucks get rode really hard, and they work. There's a lot of work for them, so having that good equipment is crucial. So we have 4 automated trucks, 2 rear loaders, 1 1-ton and 2 roll-off trucks. And then on the employee side or labor side of things, we have the Municipal Services Division Supervisor who oversees, that's Rick Hitchcock. He oversees refuse and all our street functions. We have 1 crew leader assigned to refuse, 6 refuse operators, and then we pull from the street department employees during any kind of shortfall or seasonally for spring and fall leaf season. So if you're in a scenario where, you might have an employee on vacation and an employee that's calls in sick, you're going to backfill that with street department employees. All right, so let's get into the operational inefficiencies that we have here. So I had a buddy of mine made a joke to me. He said, I could live in Rock Island for 30 years and still not know what day my trash day is. And, obviously everybody up here is a Rock Island resident. And, I'll use myself for an example. I have, my trash is picked up on Friday, my recycling is on Thursday, my yard waste is on Wednesday, and then my leaf collection is on my trash day, which would be Friday. So as you can see, I oversee the refuse department, and I'm still son of a gun, I forgot my yard waste, so to put my yard waste out, right? So I think we all kind of experience that, and that, it's good as a municipality to kind of reflect on that and if this doesn't make sense, maybe we should take a look at it. So
they have a calendar that you can put on your refrigerator that's color
that's
coded.
right.
For that legal advice.
The peanut calorie speed.
That was the first step into improving efficiencies, and then we only got so much, so we had to. But so as you can imagine, that leads to more misses because you kind of have that resident confusion. We try to provide good customer service. So a lot of times a resident might not know. They just flat out forget, and they're like, hey, my trash was missed. And then, we're going back to get it, and, it really wasn't missed. They just didn't set it out, and you can kind of see how this, that leads to more wear and tear. There's more opportunity. Every time you have a truck on the road, every time you have an employee on the road during these high-intense activities like trash collection, you're increasing your opportunity for vehicle accidents. You're increasing your opportunities for employee work comp issues. So anything you can do to try and mitigate that is generally a good idea. And then, of course, your opportunity costs that come along with that. So that's one of the issues we have. You know, our receptionists are taking more phone calls, you know, and that's not an easy gig, you know. Half the people that call them are upset about something, so. So here's where our big inefficiencies come into play, and I'd like council to try and, I know I've thrown a lot at you and envision this with me, but leaf season and yard waste, right? So I'm gonna use myself as an example. My yard waste, which is my green container, is picked up on Wednesday, and then what day of the week are my leaf bags picked up? My trash day, which is Friday. Does that make any sense, right? So I'm putting out one yard waste item on Wednesday and then another one on Friday. So from a resident standpoint, that doesn't make much sense, right? So then we have one truck that's driving around collecting yard waste, and then a whole nother truck that's driving around and picking up leaf bags, right? So, and both trucks are driving past each other's customers. I mean, so we can see kind of there's some inefficiencies there. Then the other dilemma you run into is, so like I said, we have yard waste is Monday through Thursday, and then on Wednesday we have our manual collection. Both of those services take 2 rear loader garbage trucks. That doesn't leave any equipment available for leaf collection, which means the city is renting equipment, or our guys are running around in 1-tons. We're pulling resources from the street department to kind of supplement that workload. So right out of the gate, you have direct costs from equipment rental. You need additional manpower, and you have an opportunity cost from your street department because you're pulling guys that should be filling potholes to help out with leaf collection. And then again, these trucks, one of the big components of this, now that we have some new equipment, is you can't just run your equipment and not do preventative maintenance. I mean, it's very expensive. They need a lot of, involvement from our maintenance team. So you have all this equipment, it never gets a break. It's being utilized daily. Trucks never get a break. There's a little downtime for trucks to get preventative maintenance. So that's another component of what we're trying to improve here. So what are we going to recommend? So, we internally kind of got together and we, talked to the employees, talked to supervisors. I directly oversaw refuse for 7 years, so we all kind of put our heads together and, what's the way we can improve our refuse operation. So, what we came up with, we want to modify the collection schedule to 4 days a week. So we would do, and that's what on your maps here. So let's dive into these a little bit. So if everybody looks, you have your current refuse routes is the first page there. Oh, yes, sir. I think they're down there.
I gave it to Mike.
Oh, okay. Got it?
So as you look, you can see the boundaries, all right? So again, to kind of recap here, it takes, each day of the week, it takes 3 trucks to service that zone, if you will, if that makes sense. So on Monday, there's 3 drivers, and Monday is divided into 3 separate routes, all right? So you can see down at the bottom there, each, Monday 1 is a little bit light down at Alderman Robinson's ward there, but, the other ones kind of have a little bit more. But usually you're about 800 to 900 stops for each driver. Then if you turn to the second page here, this is how we've modified our routes. And you can see we've increased each route, roughly by, getting most of them over 1,000 stops. So what we're going to look at, implementing here is putting our automated drivers on 10-hour days. They'll pick up around 1,000 to 1,100 stops. So the 3 automated employees will work Monday through Thursday. That's still a 40-hour work week. The remaining refuse employees will remain unchanged. They'll still have their refuse incentive, which would take place at 3 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock, so their scheduled hours would be 7 to 5. And on the second map here, you can see we have the manual locations annotated, and then all the red dots are all the yard waste stops. So what's the impact of this, right? That's why we're coming here to council. We're going to change people's collection schedules, this type of operational change that council needs to be aware of, right? Because when, your constituents call and say, well, my trash was on Tuesday and now it's on Wednesday, So we're going to have 6,820 customers will be impacted. So we have a little over 14,000 refuse customers. That's going to be about 46% of the refuse customers' collection days will change. The rest won't even notice. What are the benefits? All right, so first thing, solid waste, yard waste, and leaf collection are all going to be synced up on the same day. All right, so there's a big, just that right there is going to make sense to people. All of Friday is available to perform those preventative maintenance on trucks, right? So that's kind of the plan. All the trucks, the drivers, when they're done on Thursday, they get their trucks dropped off at the garage. The garage will have all of Friday to go through them and hit those PM benchmarks. Non-route functions, special pickups, manual collection, abatements, other miscellaneous functions, those can all be performed on Fridays with no interruption. We're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. Well, is this truck doing this? Is that truck doing that? So Fridays are going to be freed up to perform all those ancillary functions. You're going to get away from your weekend pickups for most holidays. Of course, that will kind of vary how the holiday falls, but in most cases, you're not going to have your weekend collections. And the biggest benefit here is you're going to have that more efficient leaf collection season. There's no equipment rental. There's less overtime. You're not going to need the seasonal labor that you usually need. So, again, you're going to have your rear loader trucks are actually going to be able to be out, which is your most efficient way to collect leaf bags. 2 guys on the back of a truck going, throwing it in. That equipment is going to be available. So you're going to see a huge efficiency in leaf collection. Now we can get in the weeds about the direct, if anybody is interested in kind of like the exact cost benefits, for an example, if you have 4 street guys at, roughly $30 an hour with their benefits, you can look at that at one of 2 ways. It's either opportunity cost to the street department, or it's another way to look at it is general fund employees are no longer subsidizing the enterprise fund. So, right there, 4 guys for a month, there's approximately $48,000 savings. And another kind of side component of this, being a refuse operator is an incredibly hard job. You're taking big trucks into tight spaces in a city that was built 100 years ago when things were being collected with these streets are built for horse and buggies. And now you have this truck with 5 tons of trash. Frankly, I'm amazed there's not an accident every single day. It is a very hard job. A lot of people think, oh, those guys, must be so good to be a refuse guy. You get done with your route and you get to go home at 1 o'clock. Well, you know what? Last time we had a refuse operator vacancy, you know how many internal employees put in for it? 0. It's because they know it is a tough gig. This is whether you're a business, a municipality, if you're going to be successful in the future, America has demographics. There is more old people than young people. There's more jobs than there are people to fill them. So if you want top talent, you're going to have pay, schedules, that are going to make people that want to work for you. So, frankly, it's a tough gig, but a 3-day weekend is, we feel that will help with better employee retention. So that's what we got. Any questions?
If a holiday falls on a Monday, then things get shut back one day?
No, because you have that buffer on Friday, no collection on Friday.
You just don't do the maintenance, instead you do pickup?
Yep.
So one of my questions is that you mentioned before you have a real hard problem getting the word out of when the neighbor or the residents' collection days are. So even with this change, how do you get that word out?
I think I don't know that we necessarily have a hard time getting the word out on when people's collections days are. They just get confused, like, oh, is my trash is Monday, when's my yard waste, when's my recycling? So it's the different services and what days those sync up. So we would hope to implement something like this prior to the beginning of leaf season in the fall. So there's really mailers is the best way to do it. And then preparing our administrative team, we work with Sarah and preparing our administrative team to, frankly, field those phone calls when they come in.
So do we send regular mailers out to let people know, to kind of answer those questions?
Once a year with your water,
Just once a year?
yes, sir.
Hey, Luke, is there something that shows Southwest a little bit better? I'm having a hard time figuring out what.
No, but your Southwest is Monday in the new schedule.
Oh, I see how it
Yeah,
is. Just
yeah.
leave my stuff off there.
Right.
Whatever. Just messing with you.
We weren't going to pick up the trash out there.
Or I'll get, since it looks like my ward's on Thursday, so what happens if there is a leaf out or someone got left out? Would they come on Friday?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so hypothetically, if there's
Yeah.
so that's a great question, actually, right? So if you have a Friday stop, right, and, the day's over at 3 o'clock and you call in and Alderman Healy says, hey, my trash got missed, well, we're either bringing somebody in on overtime, overtime for you. Just kidding. Just kidding.
That's fair.
We're either bringing somebody in on overtime or they're going to have to wait till Monday.
Yeah.
So in this new modified schedule, they're going to get serviced Friday.
So to bring up a question that you said, are your current operators okay with 4 days a week?
So that's one of the things I'd also like to note, this was one of those scenarios where, the bargaining unit also kind of recognized that this makes no sense. And so I'd like to give a shout out to them that they've been very, we have agreements in place that, if this were to be implemented, that, we'd work it all out.
Okay.
So, no issues there. And frankly, they're in favor of it, so.
And
But
that's
we do
why I asked
appreciate
that.
them, having a conversation about it.
Now, in regards to like recycling, would they be on the same schedule?
No, that's a contract that was, negotiated, so that would, So some people are gonna hit the jackpot, right?
All of them one day.
Yeah, they're gonna get it all in one day. Others not so much,
And
but,
line them all up.
right, yeah.
First days?
Yeah.
Wards.
Yeah.
Could be a little disadvantage if you have too many in one day.
Right.
Space to stage them all,
Yes.
because you can't put them right close to you. They gotta be like 3 feet apart.
Right.
For the arms to reach it. So if you had 3 different buckets out there,
You don't wanna overload it.
and bags, could be tough space-wise, with a bunch of neighbors right there, driveways that can line up.
Right.
That's great.
Thanks, good.
All right. Oh, good.
Thank you.
All right, we'll let you get to Jason Upton, and feel free to grill him. So.
Actually, yeah, Augustine, yeah, Andrea's here.
I was going to introduce him.
Oh, you go for it. No, it's your gig.
So it was over a year ago that we approached the council and we asked council to enter into a partnership with Augustana. This was due to Illinois Public Act 102-0613, which is lead inventory. So the EPA has required all municipals to prepare an inventory of lead service lines in their systems. Like I said, that was over a year ago. Augustana has worked on this project, collecting information for our inventory. We did receive a grant. I had put in for a grant through the EPA to pay for the inventory. So it'd be the collection of the data to understand what your services are made of. So with that, Augustana, I had asked them to come and kind of give an update of where we are, because we had been approached with a we had approached the council with a two-phase approach. First phase, understanding what we have in our system. Phase two of that then is, what are we going to do? How are we going to get the lead out of our system? And that's over a period of time. So with that, I'll introduce Dr. Reisner, Dr. Murphy, and Dr. Arnko with Augustana, and they're going to give a little presentation of where we're at, and then also what the next phase is for us in this project.
Room's full of doctors.
Thank you so much. So thanks for the introduction, Jason. However, the folks that are not represented on the slide are our 12 to 14 wonderful students that were working with us since basically the end of August, early September. And I'm sure they would much rather be here right now than where they're at, which is taking finals. So, yeah. Anyway, so just to give you an outline of what we want to discuss this evening is first just to remind you of the overarching goals of this partnership. Two, to give you an update on the progress that we've made, again, basically since the end of August, early September, to highlight some inventory, where we're at with the inventory, to talk about the next steps, so both short-term goals and long-term goals, and then how we could actually use your help. So I know this looks like a lot of words, but basically to give you an idea of the objectives of this partnership is first we wanted to compile and integrate all of the data and information that existed at the time, basically in an effort to, as Jason said, to really update that inventory, right? So that we could get it submitted to the state of Illinois by April 15th. And so we were able to turn that information over to Jason and Michael so they could then give it to the state of Illinois. And then, so we worked really hard on that basically from September through early April. And then we basically have been working on a predictive model. So this predictive model will allow for us to continue to refine that inventory. That, in combination with having the students use a survey that is pushed out to the community members that will help with them to self-verify, and also having our students, if someone is filling out that survey and needs help, our students will go and help them, or our students will go maybe door to door, for example, in a particular ward, and ask folks, you know, if we could have permission to enter their home and do a quick verification. And so again, the model and those verification techniques will help us to really refine that inventory, with the next big inventory being due to the state of Illinois in April of 2024. And then in the end, something that we have one student in particular and with a small team who is a finance major, and so he's been working on financing plans for who's going to pay for this, how are we going to pay for it? And so we'll come back to that. So we mentioned these service lines, and specifically lead service lines, and so why lead, right? Why is it a problem? And so if you look at the figure over here, which is a little bit tough to see, exposure to lead can come in a couple of different ways. One, through ingestion. And so one of the ways that we think about ingestion that we hear about maybe in the news is through soil that's been contaminated with lead. A kid goes and plays, right? It comes into contact with that soil, then we know how kids love to try everything in their mouth, right? So then they try to taste that soil. Inhalation through particles in the air that are being released from maybe industry. Lead-containing products. So we know that lead paint, for example, is a huge problem. And in fact, when you think about children being contaminated with lead or having high lead levels in their blood, that's usually coming from the lead paint. And then the other way is through food or water. So that's where these service lines come into play. And so, of course, it is an important source of lead exposure. However, you know, again, coming back to the kids being contaminated in high levels of lead, it's more so coming from the lead paint. And so in Rock Island, when we think about who owns the service line, right? And so we can split the service line really up into two parts. And so if I go to this next slide, the service line really is it's the underground pipes that run from the internal plumbing to wherever the source of the drinking water is. And so oftentimes it's a city water main. And so you could think of that as an entire stretch that's really split into two parts. And so who owns what part, right? And so Rock Island is in a unique position where the property owner owns the entire part, the entire service line. And so with that comes some additional challenges when you start to think about that's private property, right? And then depending on what you go after for funding, can that then cover private property? And so yeah, lots to unpack there. And so that's a challenge. So it does require logistical coordination, funding challenges, and just to give you an idea, to replace one single service line, lead service line, costs somewhere between $5,000 and $12,000. So not a lot of people can just, right, pay $5,000 out of pocket. So I mentioned that we were taking data and information to compile to put together this inventory. And so one of the sources of information that we got access to were water department inspection reports. So our students literally sat and manually entered just about 4,000 inspection reports into a huge spreadsheet that really helped us to update the inventory. So yes, those were helpful. However, this is what's where we're at. So when I say to give you an update on the inventory, so I have to thank Jenny Arkle for putting these beautiful maps together. And so this is a map of where we at with the material of the service lines. And so if you look at this map, we've broken it down into the wards. And I think what jumps out at you right away is just the amount of dark gray, right? And so what is that? Well, basically, those are parcels where we do not know the material of the service lines. And so where we're at right now is 94% of the service lines are of unknown material right now in Rock Island. 5% we know, which are the green, are non-lead, and less than 1% are known lead, which are the red dots, which you basically can't even really see up here, which speaks to, again, that fact that it's less than 1%. And then we've also provided information to break that down by ward, but even when you look at the bar graph, you can see that there's just such a large amount of unknowns that we need to deal with, and that's why we're using the predictive model as well as the survey, as well as having students maybe go door to door. So I'm going to let Michael present the other maps.
So that's a good snapshot of where we are. So the next slide, don't panic with all the red. So this is kind of looking to the next phase. So what do we think we know about all these unknowns? So, and again, it's by ward, and I would okay, it's got a red dot. So what we tried to do is take the few that we do know are lead in Rock Island and what we could pull from the literature about what predicts whether there's lead in the ground. Where are the remaining lead service lines? And if you look at, we just color-coded them by age. So if you look at 1850 to 1930, that's a real high likelihood that if they're in the ground, they're either galvanized or lead. So, and you can see there's a lot of old housing stock in Rock Island. 1931 to 1960, so the moderate, the uncertainty is a lot greater there. Like, is it lead, is it copper, is it something else? And then once you get to the green, we're pretty strong likelihood it's not lead. You can see the breakdown by ward, and you can see there's a high risk of us finding lead in the ground. It's highest in wards 1, 5, and 6. And that's really tied to just the age of the housing stock. That's just the reality on the ground. I think a couple other things that are going to come out under Illinois law is as you start to prioritize and come up with a replacement plan and finance, you have to consider vulnerable populations, and you have to consider affordability in terms of how you finance. So these are issues more to get you thinking about it, because these are the next phase once we go. This is just, and this should be less than 5 years old. So this is blocks, so census blocks, so pretty small units. This is the percentage of households in terms of how many children there are under age 5. So the most vulnerable populations are children under age 24 months, because they potentially are having formula where you're using tap water for the formula, and or you've got expectant or potential mothers. So those are the most vulnerable populations for lead coming in from water. This kind of shows you some of the hot spots where you have a large percentage of kids under age 5. And then the next one is to give a snapshot of what I call affordability. So most cities that are kind of best practices in terms of financing, they've got eligibility criteria below which you're a certain point below median household income from the area where there's some help from publicly available funds to finance. So this just shows median household income, again, by block level, so a pretty small level. And this just shows, the median household income in Rock Island is $48,000. And so you can see the purple is median household income under $30,000, so 60% or less than the median income for Rock Island. And then going up, so you kind of see a pattern emerging. We call it the boomerang, where the risk is pretty high, fair amount of vulnerable populations, low median household income. So not surprising to most people that you see these patterns in Rock Island. But that's just a snapshot of where we're at. So we talked briefly. So next steps, we've got the inventory submitted in April. There's a couple things that are going on. The first step is self-verification. So there's going to be a survey, and residents of Rock Island are going to get it in their next water report. We need people's help, residents, to help self-verify what the material type is. A couple nearby cities have done this type of survey and got 60% response or higher. So that would be great, because we'd get a lot of data quick, and we'd reduce that number of unknowns. So that's one place where we're going to be asking for help this summer. The second one is we're going to use some student researches to be more strategic, and we're going to kind of scientifically sample areas where we have gaps, where we're not getting responses, where we need to fill in the hole, where we have a lot of uncertainty. So we're going to be really careful in terms of using those researchers, because it's going to be hard to get access to go in and verify. So that'll be students will be working on that. And then finally, when we get to the end of the summer, we'll develop a predictive model to figure out our best guess of what the remaining unknowns are. Because we're not going to go get to check out every unknown on that map. So we're going to have to make our best educated guess on what's in the ground in those areas where there's still some unknowns. And then that will be the basis for the next update of the inventory, which there's another one due next April. What else would I? And I think things that we'll think about is just in terms of moving towards phase 2 is like fall and winter. And that's thinking about the city has to have a replacement plan and a financing plan that's submitted to the state of Illinois by next April as well. And that's where we'll start getting into kind of what affordability criteria there are and kind of identifying those vulnerable populations. So that's looking ahead a little further out. I don't want to bog down too much. Here's a link to the website, which it will be live eventually for the survey and the self-verification. And then I don't want to show you this survey. It's and with that, that's just a kind of a summary. Looking into fall, we were charged with the original scope to look at what are some of the different financing options to replace it, what are the pros and cons, and what might work in the city of Rock Island. And then we were asked to formulate criteria, how are we going to define vulnerable populations with the high risk? So that's more for the fall, once we have a better number of how many lead service lines we actually are dealing with. And with that, we're in front of City Council, and one of the big reasons we wanted to get here now is we're really going to need help to get the word out and to engage residents and make a big push to figure out how to knock down that number of unknowns. The best way to do it is for residents to jump in and help us to the extent they can. If they need help, that's what the Augustana students will be there for, is to jump in and help them if people need help. And then we'll try to fill in the holes as we can with students. And with that, I'm going to open it with questions and make sure we have Jason up here if there are questions.
I would make sure if you're sending students to people's houses that they know that they don't know how much it costs, because that's the first thing someone's gonna ask. You know, are you gonna make me do this, and how much does it cost? Because that's the first thought I had, you know, do I have to do this? Oh, it's between $5,000 and $12,000. Wait, so you're telling me I have to spend $12,000? That's scary for a lot of people, so.
Yeah, I think the important part of that will be getting the word out of the dangers of lead. If you have a home with a child under the age of 5, like Michael said, I would be concerned, and at that point, you know, if it's going to affect the health of my child, then I would probably be more adamant about making repairs. There is a waiver that the state is making people sign if they don't want to make repairs. You know, phase 2 will be that trying to figure out, you know, because as it was illustrated up there, you know, we're kind of different than some other cities as far as where ownership of the service line is. Unfortunately, that's what the state likes, is because even though we're not responsible for, you know, the service line, that's where they can enforce. So the state comes in and says, hey, everybody's got water service lines, so therefore municipals, you're going to be the ones who have to deal with this. Moline, I think the homeowner is responsible from the curb stop, which that's the stop that's out in the sidewalk, to the house. Then the city's responsible from the main to the curb stop. So with us, with the homeowners in Rock Island owning that whole service line, that's where the challenge is going to be as far as putting that into our plan of how do we get that removed. And that's where we look for, you know, information from the alderman. I mean, who better knows your constituents, hopefully, than you, the alderman, getting the word out that Augustana is going to be out there doing these verifications, be available for questions in identifying their line. But hopefully we can get a big response. You know, there's talk of even going to some church meetings or some ward meetings, or getting the word out through the aldermen and women as far as how do we understand what our services are. Because the closer, the tighter we pull that gap of unknowns, because unknowns are going to be listed as lead. So if it's lead or if it's copper, those can be identified. If it's unknown, it's automatically, even if it's copper in the house, if it is unknown, then it is automatically assumed as lead. So when we look up there as unknowns, they could be copper, but because we don't actually know, then it has to be assumed as lead. Yeah, and the survey is really easy. We're going to have links. It's going to be going out on the, you'll start to see it in June. We've got it going to be our link to our city website, which then is a link to the survey. So you click the survey, answer a few questions, your name, your address. There's some information on there helping people identify what their service line is, and then they hit submit, and it comes in, and then that's information that we can reduce that number of unknowns. It's also going to be in the CCR, which is your quality water report.
I can only talk about First Ward right now. I know surveys are not a good thing with us, especially when they're online. It's hard, when we had the last survey, to get a response back. Even with me beating the pavement, talking about it all the time, social media, different events, we have a gap there. We have a language barrier. We have individuals from the refugee community who just don't trust city or anyone outside of their cohort. So we're going to really have to do some work to try to break that barrier down. We're going to have to get with some organizations to kind of help us get in there to break that barrier, that language barrier and that trust barrier, so we can get that information out. But I agree also with Alderman Healy, when you mention the price, that's going to terrify people where they're not going to want to report it, because then they're going to be thinking about that price. So, I mean, we do have some work we need to do. I know there's some events that we have within First Ward that could possibly help. I'm doing a couple of block parties, we're doing community cleanups, so we can definitely get the word out by the literature. If you have literature, we can put that on doorsteps and stuff like that. But I just caution that to ensure we kind of check that. We have a lot of rentals in that area, so I don't know how that works. If you're passing the information out through the water bill, how does that work with the rentals? Because some of the landlords may keep that, it may go to the landlord, not to the actual renter. So just some things to think about.
Yeah, and through, the landlords are actually going to have the burden of the removal. So in that case, it's listed, I know.
That does not exist anymore.
Hey, welcome to my
Unfortunately, I'm
world
sorry.
where we try to figure all this out, right? But again, those are great suggestions, and I would encourage you, drop myself an email. I can forward it on to Augustana because they want to work with you guys of where should we, which group should we go out and invest in a particular ward, which people. And there is going to be availability of grants. Hopefully, we got that first grant, and that $50,000 goes towards the inventory, and that's the collection of the information. Once these inventories, which we had to submit an inventory April 15th of this year, we submitted our inventory. Again, that's just kind of what we have in place as far as an inventory, what we know, right? This is a working document, and that's what makes this partnership with Augustana a lot different than some of your cookie cutters. The other municipals, which it's great, they're appeasing the requirement, right? The regulation, they're appeasing that by submitting something. But this partnership with Augustana is also working into the future because we're collecting this data, we're building a database so that as we continue to move forward, because we have ultimately anywhere between 20 and 30 years to make this plan come into
I know me and
place.
Dr. Resner have been emailing each other, and I apologize that we have not connected. So the last Thursday of every month, I hold a town hall, so that's probably the way we can start there. Let's get together. I've been talking about it at the town hall, so they've been asking me questions, and I've been trying to stall and it's coming. I'm trying to get more information. So they're interested in trying to figure out what's the next step. So let's do that. Let's just get together so we can hopefully get you guys at the town halls, and then we can get you out from there. I also work with Community Caring Conference when we do the cleanups. So again, we have access to get to the houses and talk to the residents as they're out there, so.
Yeah, one of our goals was to set up one-on-ones with everyone here, to start working towards that. We would like to have a ward-specific engagement plan for each ward, because everyone's unique, but
Survey, is it so if you have no idea, is it detailed enough that you can figure it out, or will it basically go off the age of the house?
There is some detail in the survey. Are you talking about the survey that we're going to be putting on our website and then out there to the public?
keep going.
It's on your, it should be on the attachment.
Yep,
Oh,
I think it's there.
there it is. So there's a photo that's included in the survey. This is also on our website. So if you haven't been to water, we've had a lead on our website for quite a while. This is also on our website. This is kind of telling you where your meter is, how to find the service line coming into your house. You can do a key or a coin scratch. That determines if it's lead or not. For some people, they've never even seen a lead pipe. I meant to bring a piece of lead pipe that I have on my desk, but I forgot. They'll be taking that out to the community events, showing them the difference between copper, lead, and galvanized. But it is on the website. It is on a part of the survey. If they don't know, or they don't, they can't figure it out, then there is a box on the survey that says, I could use some help here, and then that puts them in contact with an Augustana student that would then come out and help them to identify, or myself, or any of our staff. We've also revised our work orders, so we're going in anywhere from 5 to 10 houses anyway. Our meter guys for rechecks, meter repair, and such. So we revised that and actually put information that they're now collecting out in the field, that's going to be given to Augustana. But like I said, the bigger we can get the residents to do that survey themselves, then that's the less that we have to have them going out and going door to door.
Okay.
So the state is mandating this, right?
Right?
Okay, but they've not set aside any funding for it, right? Another unfunded mandate, pretty much?
Go with utilities,
Yeah.
yep.
So if people have been on the, I know they don't call it insurance, but the water insurance plan, can that be used?
We would have to make revisions to that particular program. That is one of the ideas that we have thrown out there is, you know, one, it would increase people getting onto the program because they're like, hey, I got lead, you know? And then they would get on a list. You know, there's a lot of things that have to be figured out how you do that with the program. Because one of the things with our program is we don't like fraud, you know? And so we want to avoid somebody getting onto the program, getting their service replaced, and then they get off the program because at that point, they're not continuing to pay onto the program.
Right, they haven't paid enough into,
Yeah.
right.
So
I
there's
get
a
that.
lot of things that we're still, you know, as we enter phase 2 here, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of things, a lot of communication that we hope to have with the council members, because like I said, you guys know your wards, you know who, you know, the makeup of them and how to get in contact with them. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But looking into the program and looking at that as a bridge, you know, there's also some, we've spent a lot of time up at CED. Augustina has been up there with us talking about different funding options that's available because of that horseshoe, that lower income area that CED is aware of. You know, what kind of funding can we get through CED? What kind of additional funding can we get through the state? So, yeah.
And hopefully our cultural liaison, is that the correct one, can help with the refugee communities and getting the word out and explaining it to them.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a really great example of why having a program like that is going to be so important moving forward as we try to do some of these things where, I mean, quite frankly, folks might not have ever been taught what lead is. Curiously enough, it was mentioned lead in soil previously being a concern. Just before the pandemic, we were having those beginning of season orientation meetings for those participating in the community garden program. And we kind of started to talk to them a little bit about lead in soil and, you know, precautions you should take when you're gardening. I would say almost none of them knew what lead was in the sense of it being a toxic thing, right? They might have encountered lead as a material, right? But none of them had ever taken a chemistry class, right? So that is definitely going to be a partnership with Public Works, trying to make sure that we reach those more vulnerable populations. And exactly correct, we will be using a cultural liaison, Prosper Nyangabire, to engage with that particular group, but others as well as we build out that liaison program.
Yep. So I have 2 other dates. So in Ward 3, on June 19th, that's a Monday night, we're having a ward meeting. So we can get you on the agenda for that. And I just received a notice for the Rock Island County NAACP Housing Committee, which is meeting on June 10th, I think, at 9 a.m. I'm not sure what or if there is anything with them, but Amitra Carroll, she would be the person to contact and, you know, might be worth a follow-up at least.
Are the kids, I can say kids, students, I apologize. I give my age, I guess they're kids. But are they doing this part of a class or are they getting paid? If so, how much do they get paid?
Actually, ironically enough, just before we were here.
If you could be in the microphone, please.
Sorry. But right before we were here, we were listening to presentations from a class, a sociology, anthropology class, where the students worked on gathering some information. But the 12 to 14 students that I mentioned when I spoke, those were paid students that worked with us basically from August through now, and actually a majority of them are staying on this summer to continue their work.
And they'll be the ones that may be going out to door or whatever it is?
Correct, yeah.
But can I ask how much they get paid?
They get paid the state minimum.
$13, I think is what it's at then. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, like I said, we do, we put out a call to ask for classes if they wanted to integrate this project into their class at all. And so we had 2 engineering classes and then the sociology, anthropology class.
Okay, thank you. No?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Move on.
So one last thing, so start looking on our website, and hopefully by sometime this week, the website's already up there on our webpage about lead. The survey, you'll be seeing it, I think it's like 4 different areas on our website where you can click on that survey. Hopefully we get that up and running this week and it'll be live, so you can be the first ones to fill out the survey for your houses, so.
Once again, thank you for the collaboration and partnership between Augustana and the city. As always, it's a wonderful pleasure to be able to do this opportunity and continue to work on that. So thank you very much.
Augustana president is here.
Yeah, Augustana, yes, Andrea, obviously. Yep, no, she's right there. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Got a meeting with her later this week. All right. If there's no further questions, we'll move on to the next presentation. Thank you. All right. Next up, I guess, I don't know, Chief Landy's going to introduce everybody. We got Chief Bladel here and Sarah Ott from the City of Davenport. And I guess I'm going to throw out, talk about cooperation. The City of Davenport on this topic has been outstanding in partnership. I'm going to backtrack a little bit, and Chief, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but we had the pleasure of going to Washington, D.C., if you remember a while back ago, and talking about this out there with the legislators. And once again, Davenport took the lead on that, has continued to take the lead and working to try to get better presence with the FBI and the ATF and work on major gun crimes and that sort of thing here in the Quad Cities. So I just, ahead of time, do a shout out to Davenport. Thank you very much. And with this BVI or GVI situation, once again, helping teach us and work with it because they've been doing it for several years now and have had some good success. So, but thank you, and go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. I know the council's been very interested in GVI. It was one we weren't trying to bring here to Rock Island. Davenport's been doing that for just over a year now. I was actually, Tia LaShore from Family Resources was going to be here tonight, but had a family matter come at the last minute. So I didn't want to have to reschedule this because obviously the council's study sessions are pretty busy. I reached out to Sarah Ott, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for the City of Davenport, and she was gracious enough to, at the last second, come over here and talk about GVI, along with Chief Bladel from the City of Davenport. Really, the material, the slides you see, a lot of this is from the information that Davenport has put together. So we've added some slides in here from information for the City of Rock Island as far as our statistics. I'll have Deputy Chief McLeod talk about that. But just moving forward into the presentation. There we go. And I don't want to go too far into this, but obviously the City of Davenport was seeing some serious violent crime issues, just as we have seen here in the City of Rock Island. They wanted to address that. Obviously, we can only do so much with law enforcement. We're not going to solve these problems by arresting people, not everyone. It's just not going to go away that way. We've got to have a different approach to it to try to divert some of these individuals away from being victims or committing these crimes. So this is something that Davenport had gotten into with group violence intervention, and we last year when I took over as chief, I'd had conversations with Chief Bladel and Sarah about the program and their initiative. Obviously, there was a lot of media coverage. We're very interested in looking into it and seeing if we could bring it to Rock Island. Also had a conversation with Tia LaShore from Family Resources. She'd secured some state funding to also bring it to Rock Island County. So there was initial funding to start hiring personnel and to start doing those things here. We started off with Family Resources last year for victims assistance, and we've been doing that since, I believe, June of 22. So this was the next step, the next evolution in working with Family Resources. So With that, I'm going to turn this over because our next slide is going to be some of the information that we have as far as here in the city of Rock Island with some of the violence, particularly gun violence that we're dealing with here, and why we think GBI is a good strategy to implement to help deal with some of that.
Well, good evening. Make sure I get this right. So thanks to our crime analysts, we've been able to really kind of dive in and get a better snapshot of some of our shots fired issues that have been going on over the past several years. You'll see just covers from 2019 to 2022. Stayed pretty consistent for the first couple years there. And then like everybody really across the nation, we experienced a pretty large increase from 2021 to 2022. Numbers from 2023 are still coming in right now, obviously, but they are staying pretty consistent right now. If I move forward into our victimology, that didn't turn out too well, at least a little bit on that apparently, but just trying to understand a little bit more about who we're going to be dealing with from the GVI perspective. The people that are our victims are often ends up being our suspects later, and vice versa. So we wanted to really kind of dive into closer on the victimology. We're looking into the demographics of the suspects as well, but we don't currently have software that really supports crunching all those numbers, so we're working with our analysts and we're going to be getting some of those more later. From this problem analysis slide, I stole a lot of this information from Davenport, but this is really shows the correlation between basically the different shootings. Every box there is a different shooting that happened, and you see they'll cover from Davenport to Rock Island, 2021, 2023, all the way around, and sometimes more than one gun is used in the same crime, but yet then they're used in different crimes. This is all gathered through our NIBIN results, the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, and we'll be able to tell some of these we're able to recover, some are still out there. But obviously this shows that we have people going back and forth across the river, being involved in the same types of crimes, and really it's a small group of people that are committing the most amount of violent crimes. The spatial concentration shows a little bit, just a 2022 shots fired, shows a heat map where the largest concentrations of the shots fired are occurring. This was an entire year's worth. I guess the hotter the color there, the red is where things are happening a lot more often, and then the yellow, then finally down to the blue. So. And I'll turn over the remainder of the presentation to Chief or Sarah.
Thank you, Mayor and elected officials. Thank you for having me. So again, as I do want to shout out to your police department. It's been fantastic working with your chief and all the officers from your department over the past several years, and we do great collaboration across the river, which is fantastic. But as you saw from the data that they put in there, a lot of what we learned when we were going through this is that gun violence seems like it's overwhelming and that we cannot get a handle on it. But when you actually dive into the data, you see that we have a small portion that's driving a lot of our violent crime. So when we have the ability to start looking at things and analyzing things, understanding that neighborhoods, although spatially, they're pretty, you can see on a map probably from years that we have a lot of crime spatially, but it's not the geographics that's causing the crime. You look at it and sometimes it's concentrated demographically. It's not demographics that are driving the crime. What we found is a lot of it is group dynamics or group-related individuals. So from that, we have to figure out how we as law enforcement help bring a solution. We're always the ones responding, right? By the time the enforcement piece comes in, something has happened along the way to now we have to enforce. What group violence intervention does is it actually brings together your law enforcement, your service providers, as well as your community together to put prevention and intervention on the front end so you're not relying on the law enforcement end. Hopefully as that goes, you'll have less enforcement, but also it'll continually slow down those cycles, right? Because we continue to respond and react and respond and react. And, going through what you guys went through as a city last year, and we look at just the data nationally, your law enforcement is exhausted. We're tired of going to shootings. We're tired of going to people getting shot and those things. So we have to figure out a different way and help infuse our community into those processes. And again, I can't thank your guys' department enough. They're doing fantastic work back and forth. And Sarah's the mastermind of all this, so we'll let her go.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Ott. I'm with the City of Davenport. So we started this journey really about 2 years ago in our city. You saw those headlines at the beginning of the presentation that our community was seeing seemingly every day, right? And just as Chief was saying that the officers are exhausted responding to these instances of shots fired and homicides, our community was tired of seeing these headlines every day, right? There was a sense that Davenport was not safe, that people did not feel safe in their neighborhoods, right? And so we really started on this journey about 2 years ago. It was kicked off with the Mayor's Violent Crime Task Force of what can we do to strategically intervene in these cycles of violence? And that's where we came to GVI as the solution that works for our community, and hopefully maybe a solution that works well for your community as well. So what is GVI? At its heart, it's law enforcement and the community standing and acting together to intervene in cycles of violence. And how they do that is by reaching out directly to those that are at highest risk of violent victimization and or offending. And we know that victims today are often perpetrators tomorrow. Perpetrators today are often victims tomorrow. And it's a very small number of people that are driving this violence within these group dynamics. The problem analysis that we did in Davenport was that 0.18% of our population, so less than 2/10 of our population, is driving 56% of the gun violence in our community. So what can feel to be an overwhelming problem actually is something that we can have an impact on if we focus on the right individuals that are driving that crime. And so GVI identifies those individuals at highest risk of violent victimization or offending, and then reaches out in a partnership of law enforcement, community members, and social service providers to get the shooting to stop. And so we'll go through that a little bit. It's the power of three, really, right? We have our community members who have a credible moral voice against violence. These are individuals that have moral authority in their neighborhoods. They are well known. They are connected with individuals who may be participating in crime. There's a genuine offer of help from social service providers, but there are further consequences if the violence continues. So this is how it works. We can talk about it at a 30,000-foot view of the philosophy behind the strategy, but how do we then bring that down to operationalize that within our community, right? So here's how GVI works. It is led with law enforcement. I like to think of it kind of as a sandwich, maybe an Oreo if you like cookies, right? You have law enforcement on the front end who has the information of who is driving violence in our community, right? You have your crime analysts within your department. We have a great network of analysts throughout the Quad Cities and all of the law enforcement agencies working together. They are the ones with the information on who is currently driving violence in our community. With that information, they are then able to pass that off to community members who can proactively go out and reach out to these individuals to help stop shootings before they occur, right? So as Chief Ladle was saying, we were in this reactive cycle, right? Law enforcement might have intelligence on something that's going to happen, but until a shooting happens, law enforcement, right, they come in on the back end after something has happened. What would it look like then for us to be able to share information to go out and intervene before a shooting occurs? And so that is why GVI at its heart has to be led from the front end with law enforcement, identifying those at highest risk of violence so that we can then go through the rest of the strategy. So once those individuals are identified by law enforcement, we open direct lines of communication with them. That is the partnership that I talked about earlier between law enforcement, community members, and social service providers. Within that communication then, there are several messages that happen. One, law enforcement has a clear stand against violence and further consequences if the violence continues. But then two, social services comes in and has has services that they can offer to help these individuals as well, right? So we have a meaningful support to keep people safe, alive, and out of prison. But then on the back end, so I said, right, it's a sandwich, it's an Oreo, it's led with law enforcement, you have this community portion that's happening in the middle, but if the violence continues, there is absolutely strategic consequences on the back end if people continue to shoot and kill in our community. So direct communication can look a couple different ways. I won't go into too much details on this, but we in Davenport have been doing custom notifications for our direct communications. That is one-on-one communication with these individuals. We often go to their homes, we knock on their doors, we have these conversations with them, but they can happen in a group setting, which is called a call-in. To date, we haven't done that yet in Davenport. This is Dwayne Hodges. He is a community partner with us in the GVI strategy in Davenport. He has been a phenomenal partner, but I want to make sure that this is absolutely clear that GVI is not a law enforcement strategy. GVI is not a social service strategy. GVI is a community strategy. It is law enforcement standing and acting together with their community members. And this is so important because the community members' message against violence resonates in a way that doesn't come from law enforcement or come from social services. Our law enforcement officers can stand up and say till they're blue in the face, stop the shooting, but that message doesn't necessarily land with those that are creating violence in our community. But the message that does land is from other community members who say, no, we agree with them, the violence has to stop, right? When they have these relationships with these individuals, when they're hearing this from a trusted community member, from someone in their neighborhood, from a football coach, from a mentor, that message resonates in a way that they don't hear from other institutional leaders. So I just want to give a shout out to Dwayne. He's been a fantastic partner for us. He is. I love Dwayne. I apologize. This is T's presentation, so I'm kind of winging it as I go along. But custom notifications, really, while we want to help people, right, the message is we want to keep you safe, alive, and out of prison, right? And we know if you use guns in our community, that's not going to be the end for you, right? You are going to be hurt, you're going to be dead, or you're going to be incarcerated. Like, that's what happens when you use guns in our community. But we want to see you safe, alive, and out of prison. So to that end, we will help you if you let us, but we will absolutely stop you if you make us. We want our community to be safe. And so there's a prior notice of consequences there, right? We know who you are. We know who your associates are. We know the violence that you have done in the past. We want it to stop. We're not here to talk about anything that's happened in the past. We're here to talk about what your future looks like, right? We want to see you safe, alive, and out of prison. But there is that forewarning of consequences if the violence continues. And then support and outreach, right? They are a critical part of the success of the GVI strategy. And I think, T has a background in social services, so she goes into a lot of detail in her presentation that I will not necessarily hit on. But I think there's a couple things that are important to know when we're talking about social services within the GVI strategy. Traditional social services are not what the individuals who are at high risk of violent victimization or offending need. Their lives are incredibly unsafe and their lives are incredibly chaotic. And until we can address those two factors in their lives, traditional social services isn't what they need to stop the shooting. We need to help them find safety, and we need to help them kind of tamp down on some of the chaos in their lives. Only then can we then move into traditional social services. So while GVI is a philosophical shift for law enforcement, it's also a philosophical shift for our social service providers because it's a different way of providing services and meeting the client where they are at. After that has happened, after they are safe, after that chaos has been tamped down, let's absolutely link them to traditional social services. So I think the other important thing to note, I'm gonna go off on a riff here and not necessarily follow the presentation, so I apologize. We are about a year into the strategy here in Davenport. We have done about 90 custom notifications to date. So I said, 0.18% of the population is driving 56% of our gun crime. We've done about 90 custom notifications in that first year. Of those 90, 4 have recidivated with a gun. So that means 86 of our highest, those at highest risk of violence have not used a weapon in our community since they've been custom notified. Like that's really good success, right? Of those 90, we have about 16 that are actively engaged in services with Family Resources. And we often get the question, well, shouldn't that number be higher? Shouldn't we have a higher ratio of people involved in services? And yeah, I think absolutely we want people involved in services because we want them to better their lives for the future. But I think we need to remember that this is a violence prevention strategy. And so at its heart, if the people that we've talked to have stopped the shooting, that is a success. People may heed the message to stop the violence and never receive any services. And I still consider that a win because at the end of the day, the violence for that person has stopped. We absolutely want to get them into services, and Family Resources does a great job in continually reaching out to these individuals. But I think we need to be able to look at what the success of the strategy is from a holistic lens. When we go and we knock on their door and we have conversations with them, we offer them services, but we don't tell them you have to have services, right? We tell them you have to stop the violence. And so it's just a different paradigm and a way of looking at things. But we have seen great success, and the people that are involved in services, those 16 people and their families, because we have wraparound services that are offered to their families as well, have been very successful for those individuals. This is all that. The big small things, that's another philosophical shift for our service providers. Again, meeting people's basic needs, making sure that they're safe, making sure that the chaos is tamped down is very, very important. And I don't want to speak out of turn, so I am not going to speak for Family Resources, but I do know that these are the services that they offer within their organization. And questions? Chief will answer them all for you.
Yeah. Which chief?
All of them. Just kidding.
There you go. I'll ask the question. Are you in Davenport at this point, and then we can ask and rock on. With the school systems, are you involved? Is the Davenport school system involved in this?
That's a great question. So if you go back to the victimology, that was at the beginning of the slide, and I don't know Rock Island's exact demographics for their victimology. I think there was a misnomer in Davenport when we first started this, that this was entirely a juvenile problem. The Mayor's Violent Crime Task Force was kicked off after a homicide of a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old in our community. And so I think there was a misnomer that it was juveniles driving the majority, if not all, of the gun violence in our community. When we dove into the data, that just was not true. The vast majority of victims and perpetrators are between 18 and 30. However, about 20% of the perpetrators of violent crime in our community are under the age of 18. They are in our schools. And so we have a really great partnership with the Davenport Community School District, and we're actively working to figure out what is the best way to bring custom notifications to youth and juveniles. This is an adult strategy, I will say that from the get-go. When we're doing custom notifications, the strategy is built to deal with adults, but we do know that there are youth in our community that are at risk of violence, and so we're working with our school district right now to build that out. We don't have a perfect solution for it, but we are actively working towards that. Something you want to add to schools?
No, Sarah said it very well. Juveniles pose a particular problem for us in dealing with, but I will say that we're working with Rock Island School District to bring our SRO back into the high school. My hope is with staffing, as it increases, we'll be able to add another SRO. My goal is to be bringing that agreement to the council for approval eventually here real soon. So that has helped. We've actually been assigning one of our detectives up back at the high school intermittently, which has been helpful, I think. We've had meetings with the school district several times, and they're very appreciative of it. But as far as juveniles go, we are struggling with the same issues, and there's not an easy answer to that one.
Questions? Yes, Judith.
So, obviously, Iowa is different from Illinois in terms of our laws, so, like, we don't have the same consequences, maybe, that we can,
One of the things.
or do we? I mean, I know that law has
The-
been,
Yes, the state of Illinois and the state of Iowa are slightly different as far as sometimes their approach on things legislatively. However, one of the important things that I think Chief Bladel brought up in one of his meetings is one of the things they did when they brought GVI to Davenport was getting the judges together along with their prosecutors and basically explaining this to them. And I don't want to speak for Chief Bladel, but I think he said that a lot of the judges said, we didn't even know that this person had all this history, was that dangerous. It was never brought to our knowledge. So that was where the custom notifications come in, is that they documented, they've met with this individual, this is the problems that they've been having, and this is what they did, and explained that there'd be consequences if they continued down that path. I can let Chief Bladel kind of expand on that more, but one of the things I'm working on is I've been in contact with our state's attorney, Dora Villarreal, and next thing we're working on is trying to get a meeting set up with members of her office, probation, and the judges to try to, again, explain this process to them, GVI, and how, if we do have somebody that does reoffend, that this is what we've done to try to help that person and get that person away from that lifestyle so they know that this isn't the first time that this has happened. And hopefully that will go into their decision-making when it comes down to either setting bond or filing charges and pursuing these matters.
Chief Bladel, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'll add is that he mentioned it perfectly. The concept with the judges was we're not out here arresting everybody. We don't want to put everybody in jail. We understand that we have a very small percent that's driving the crime. We know who's driving the crime. If we have the ability to communicate that with our prosecutors, with our judges, then we'll be able to hold those individuals who are highest at risk or who cause the majority of our violence. So it's not we're not out here arresting everybody. And they put that emphasis on that, it's only a small amount of people that we're actually asking, saying, hey, this person needs to be held for a little bit longer, a little bit stronger bond. So those things were, yeah.
So with the custom notifications, because I know most of the crime goes back and forth.
Yep.
You have kids from Davenport and Rock Island. It crosses the river. How would that work with the custom notifications? I mean, because I'm pretty sure you have cases that are affiliated with Rock Island and vice versa.
Yeah.
So would that custom notification kind of expand a little bit or something?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and exactly how we kind of envisioned that. So we, as Quad Cities law enforcement, has been meeting now every Tuesday, actually. Your law enforcement gets together, we go over every shooting within the Quad Cities. We're able to compare notes and understand. So from our perspective, before, Rock Island would potentially jump into group violence. If we had somebody over here, we'd work with Rock Island to go over here and custom notify. So it is trying to expand it out, because again, we're only talking, we're not talking a mass amount of people here. We're able to track that down, but it's cooperation, and it's going, I'd say it's going very well.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I would guess that one of the things that probably, at least in my experience of doing this job, doing that kind of work for 31 years, is that the 3 strikes you're out, we're going to lock you. That's not the big driver, I bet. I bet the big driver is probably having contact with these folks and trying to get them. I would think that rather than the punishment being different in Iowa than it is in Illinois, the real thing is, hey, we're aware of what's going on. We're trying to give you some services, give you some options that they wouldn't seek out. I bet that's probably, I don't know, but I would guess that's at least as important as the stick. I would guess the carrot is probably more effective than the stick, because to me, when I've seen 15-year-old kids, they're like, well, dude, you're almost dead. What do you know? They think they have no concept of 15 or 20 or 30 years, and you say you're going to spend the rest of your adult life in prison. But when they have other options, don't you think that that's more important than the actual threat of extra time in prison?
Yeah. So you look at that again, and we talked a little bit about chasing the cycle of violence, right, and exhaustion, and understanding that law enforcement doesn't bring the solution. So we have to change our mindset. A lot of times we come across information, right? Somebody on social media maybe threatening a gun. We don't have charges. Somebody, we stop a car where we arrest one person with a gun, but there's 5 other people. We have all these opportunities to talk to people and reach out and have these conversations ahead of time before particular gun violence in there. That's how we slow that down. But you're absolutely right. You have to take the prevention and then work on the intervention. And if you don't, if we're putting all the information or even resources into law enforcement, that's all you're gonna get. We're gonna continually chase that cycle of violence, and then we're gonna wait until something happens, and then by the time it gets to us, we miss those opportunities of prevention or even intervention, so, yeah, very good.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I can't wait for it to start. I mean, I'm tired of getting the emails pretty much every other day about something, so, I know T and what's the name, real well, so I know they're really successful what they do, and T has been trying hard to get this on the Rock Island side.
Well, whatever the city of Davenport can give you, I can tell you, I can't praise your police department enough. We've all been through a lot as law enforcement, but they've always been a very valued partner across the river, and we do deal with a lot of the same issues, so.
Well, ditto, you guys have been great to work with too. I'll speak for the chief, but I know I've had to deal with you guys and work with it, and it's been a pleasure, and thank you very much for the olive branch out there to help with this. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Again, thank you to Sarah and Jeff. I really appreciate them stopping over.
Yes.
Thank you.
Short notice. All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved and second. I assume no discussion with that. Roll call, please.
Alderperson Healy.
Aye.
Robinson. Hertz.
Aye.
Gilbert.
Aye.
Swanson.